Welcome to this little live session about the future beyond Viva Goals. I can see from some of the participants, we also already had conversations or we are in touch about this topic, but we want to take a step back today and share a couple of learnings that we were able to gather over the last couple of months since Microsoft has announced that they will shut down Viva Goals. Obviously, we will not even try to pretend we are unbiased or independent as a technology company in this space of goal management, of strategy execution. But I do think that from all the conversations, also some of the migration projects that we did the last 3-4 months, we learned a lot. And our team has by now interviewed more than 100 organizations about how they look at Viva Goals and the time beyond, the time after, about their plans, how they react, but also their experience with Viva Goals before. And today, yes, of course, here and there, it will also be some examples how we are doing these migrations now. But I really want to share some of the most important insights and patterns that we've seen over the last couple of months, because I think no matter how your future looks like, how you are making decisions for your future operating model and for your company's goal setting, there's valuable insights in there that you can benefit from. And that's what we're going to do today. Let's try to use the chat. Every now and then I'll have a look there. If you have questions, I think most of them we'll be able to cluster and answer at the end. There will be time for a Q&A, I hope, but also in the meantime, feel free to use the chat. So what are we going to do? We are going to start just real quickly with a look behind the curtain. What have we heard? Why did this happen? And also what were the different perspectives and the different kind of messages maybe also customers got from Microsoft? And then a little summary of what we can learn from it, because we saw like 3 or 4 main patterns in the experiences that companies had with Viva Goals. The main part of today's session will be about how to plan the next move, how to plan your future now towards a future-proof setup. And then in the end, we want to collect a couple of best practices that we gathered with some of the fast-moving companies who are already migrating or who have successfully migrated. Yeah, then it's a wrap. Again, hope to have some discussion, some Q&A in the end. But with now, I'd just jump into it. So what happened? Everyone who's here, I'm sure, knows it. End of last year, Microsoft announced they're going to shut down Viva Goals. All the developments have already stopped end of last year. And I think most companies, particularly the bigger rollouts, have gotten prolongations until the end of the year. That's the facts that I think are very public. A very interesting development after Microsoft spent more than 200 million on buying Ally as a previous independent company, integrating it into the Viva suite. Not so much later, now they're deciding to pull out of this space. And what did we hear about the background of this? So what's interesting is that Microsoft and some Microsoft employees confirmed this to us. They didn't really want to pull out of this space. They had problems with adoption, product feedback, and also scaling the tool, which we'll come to in a second. But I think initially what a lot of enterprise customers were communicated was that Microsoft actually had been working on a new version. Some called it Viva Goals 2. I think there was discussions about different kind of positioning as well, but that was a step in between. And then at a management offsite end of last year, there was a decision to stop Viva Goals and, interestingly enough, shift all the resources behind to work on Copilot. The AI work streams and products of Microsoft. We'll come to that in the end, because I think there is a lot behind that. So that's a destiny other Microsoft product recently have also shared. They're going to be shut off, and the resources, the engineering capacities, everything is moved towards Copilot. And again, we will come to that. I think there's a lot of interesting insights behind. Now, what did we see when talking to customers? So I think a couple of interesting things. Again, by now, I think it's about 100, mostly European, but also some US companies that we interviewed and that we structured the insights from. And less than 20% of them are still pursuing larger rollouts. But this is quite in contrast to their initial plans. So almost half of those companies we talked to said they were stuck with 150 to 500 users, even though they had bigger plans. They wanted to establish Viva Goals as a global tool for companies' goal setting, for their strategy execution. And something must have happened along the way. And that was sort of like our entry into digging deeper and asking different kind of questions about the experience, about why things did not work out back then. And when we asked those questions, from all the answers, we saw three main themes, three main reasons and root causes where companies seem to have had particular challenges. First was about positioning and the involved stakeholders. So both how Microsoft positioned Viva Goals, but also how the topic was positioned within the customer organizations, and respectively, what kind of stakeholders were involved. So what we learned is that in almost all of the installations, corporate IT, Microsoft's main stakeholder, in most cases, I would say, was the main users and was the starting point where the Viva Goals implementation had started. Sometimes HR departments where drivers were involved. I think out of these 100 companies plus that we interviewed, in less than 5 cases, we had like significant involvement of finance, strategy, or any other roles that would be closer to the C-suite. Yeah? So it's been quite clearly in these kind of buckets, and it was very seldomly part of a bigger operating model, a bigger process design, which brings me to the second topic. Yeah, Viva Goals, I think in most cases that we saw so far, was quite an isolated island, both in terms of integration in other processes, integration in the overall operating model, but also integration in how do different stakeholders look at this. Technically speaking, from a data perspective, from a reporting and analytics perspective, this was reflected there as well. So the Microsoft suite was very present, right? So Viva Goals was well integrated into MS Teams, connected with Microsoft Planner or Power BI, decently well in most cases. But other critical data that we always see as crucial to make strategy execution work, input, output, impact data, we'll come to that in a second. Viva Goals was mostly disconnected from that, and respectively, as a consequence, I would say that the analytics, the reporting, and the value it could have had for other stakeholders in strategy, in the C-suite, was quite limited. That was sort of like the second category of challenges that a lot of companies have been talking about so far. And then last but not least, how was the onboarding managed? How was the change management and the employee enablement managed? Big challenge, I think, for anything in rolling out software in enterprise, but seems to have been a particular challenge in that space. So we had a lot of like self-service, do-it-yourself onboardings, how one customer called it. So a couple of important things with regards to change management seem to have been missing there. There was no clear picture of how does Viva Goals fit into our bigger picture. Yeah, why do we do this? How will it help us? Whom is this for? What are the benefits? And that's, I think, always one important pillar that usually drives success, that we at Workpath always invest a lot into in starting with a company, and a lot of companies were struggling. And what we were a bit surprised that also the partner ecosystem, which is definitely one of the superpowers of Microsoft, wasn't really enabled to embed Viva Goals in their practice, right? For example, in their strategy and their transformation projects. So there was not a lot of enablement and change capacity in the ecosystem around Viva Goals. And a lot of companies shared with us that they could feel that it was a problem. And then the second aspect of managing change and making sure this works was there was not a lot of infrastructure around how to optimize this process, right? If you want to be successful with corporate goal management or strategy execution, if you take a broader look, continuously measuring if the process works, where problems are, where teams struggle with adopting it, where there's maybe too much manual work, where there's poor engagement. If you don't look at this and continuously optimize the process and invest into enablement, it's always a challenge. I've never seen a strategy execution process that just works plug and play. It's always sort of like, it always takes an integration of technology and the human side of things, the enablement, the change management. And this was, as I said, a third pillar of challenges that we've seen and we've heard a lot from the companies we talked that are now looking for alternative solutions after the time of Viva Goals in their company. So that's sort of like some summaries of what we've learned, a little bit of a behind the curtain. Sometimes when we shared those learnings, we still see that obviously there's different tiers of customers for Microsoft. I think some of the largest European enterprise customers had like preferred treatment and more transparency. So I hope that in these findings, for some of you at least, there's some additional insights and helpful information in it. Let's move on to the second part. Let's move to what can we make out of these learnings and how can we plan our next move if we are in a role to decide what's after Viva Goals, and if we are maybe responsible for our company's operating model and our process landscape, our technological infrastructure to make this operating model work. We have two checklists, and they build basically on the best practices that we took from the companies we're working with, from all the companies we've interviewed in the context of Viva Goals. And I'm taking this out because we want to start with the first one, and I'm not going to go through all of the elements. I want to just focus on the first 2 to 3 criteria that companies migrating away from Viva Goals now look at to make this a success, to build on the learnings from Viva Goals in the past. And then same for the technology checklist. We will just focus in and zoom in on 3 or 4 of the most important check marks that companies want to set when now preparing a migration and developing the future operating model that they want to build on. And on the left side of the operating model checklist, I will build obviously on the 3 main learnings, the 3 categories of learnings that I was just sharing. So challenge number 1, positioning and stakeholders. I already shared the challenge behind. This just gives some more context, right? If we talk about goal management, goals in companies, it's such a ill-defined, kind of fuzzy term sometimes, and you find goals in so many different areas and processes, which also means there's a lot of different stakeholders who have their own steering needs, their own perspectives on this topic, and it's different kind of processes that have to play together there. Yeah? So just the 4 most common stakeholder groups and dimensions: product, tech, IT, delivery units. I mentioned this. This is the most common area where Viva Goals has been used. They have usually, when we talk about goal management, like a product portfolio, a product strategy, a delivery perspective. So they have usually very well-established project management infrastructure. They use Jira or Azure DevOps. And then Viva Goals was used to sort of like put the goals on top of that. It was okay for this kind of local optimization, defining IT or tech goals for your delivery on top of a backlog, to be fair, that usually already existed. So in many of these cases, you have a problem of you define output first and then outcomes and value in your goals second. But that's not something we're going to go into the details about. But that's one area, right? So it doesn't answer all the questions you have in IT when steering an IT organization, but that's where Viva was used. Then talking about goals in big companies, you have HR, yeah, you have people performance management, you have goals that are relevant for bonus and incentives. Here, obviously, when we're talking about enterprise in particular, there is big companies, there is big tools like SAP SuccessFactors or Workday that already cover parts of that. And I think they're doing actually quite good with regards to personal goals and the bonus and incentives topic. pay for performance, how it's usually called. Also here, Viva Goals was used a little bit, but it wasn't always clear how do those things play together. Yeah, is this now redundant? Is this integrated? Is it complementary? So also here, lots of question marks. And then you can go on, right? Finance, obviously, finance controlling has budgeting process, a portfolio and budgeting process sometimes where you decide who gets headcount, who gets resources for the next year. Corporate performance management, this is called sometimes. And also here, if you don't have finance at the table, if it's not clear how those processes can play together, how they have as little redundancy as possible, and how you can make sure that these different prioritization and planning rhythms don't work against each other, you'll have a problem. And I think that was one of the main challenges that Viva Goals faced. And I think I'm going to share one or two more details there, how you can do it. One big learning, if we talk about the future now, we always recommend to start with a proper playbook, yeah, with clear roles. And over time, at least, you also should make sure you align on the process map, how those things should play together. You will never have all of these stakeholders in the beginning, right? This would take probably a year or two in many companies, but it should be the goal to get them at the table and to work towards a process design where those things play together. Challenge number 2 is closely connected. This is about data, right? And we always visualize it like this. You have tons of data in your company, and it's quite chaotic, some would say. You have impact data, input data, output data, outcomes data, and they are living in different processes and tools, the ones that we just seen here. So when we talk about one integrated operating model, you don't want to have it look like this. You want to make sense out of it, right? And you want to connect those in how we call it impact chains and impact loop. So in order to make sure your Viva Goals is well integrated in the past, it would have helped, I think, to take a look at this and say, okay, we have different kinds of data, input, output, outcomes, impact, as I said. Where does this data live today? What kind of tools, what kind of data sources and processes do we already have? And how can it be integrated? I think in many cases, Viva Goals was bought to improve outcome orientation, to bridge a gap between output projects and impact. But it stayed that kind of island with redundancies in these adjacent processes and didn't really manage to connect the dots. That's something we at Workpath always focus on. It's not just about this new OKRs island, for example, but it's about connecting the dots and making sure that existing data and processes can be integrated in your steering model, in your goal setting tool. So it doesn't just remain this island, which is just yet another tool, creates redundancies, creates yet more documentation and manual reporting work. You can avoid all of that if you first look at what I'm just sharing here, and if you think towards one integrated operating model. And I think that's a big learning when talking about the future of an integrated operating model that includes goal setting, as Viva Goals was supposed to support it. This is just one customer example that I brought here. This is how it can look when we, together with customers before the rollout, best case, or over the first couple of cycles, draw a map of what exists and how could those things play together. So you can see on top right, corporate strategy. It exists. It has to be communicated very reliably. The companies we work with, when we interview the employees, when we do surveys, 60 to 70%, it's crazy. 60 to 70% of the people say, I don't know our strategy and I don't know how my work contributes. It's very high. And if you ask only managers, it's still around 25 to 30% on average. So where does your corporate strategy live? How can you make it more accessible? That's a starting point for many. And with Workpath, we, for example, have the strategy hub, but it might be other sources that you can use, right? This picture just is about connecting all the dots and making sure that they can play together, they can be integrated, and you can benefit from connected data from all of these sources. Yeah, then obviously company goals, yearly goals, tertial or quarterly goals, OKRs, that's probably the focus of Viva Goals, and it is one important module of Workpath, but it only really unleashes its full potential if it's also connected to the very bottom right, your project management world with Azure DevOps, Planner, Jira, etc., whatever tools you use to manage your output, it has to be seamlessly integrated with where your people communicate and collaborate, like Microsoft Teams. And then also integrating this with something like SuccessFactors, so you can make it very easy and clear how personal goals that you get a bonus for are different from your cross-functional team goals, for example, to execute on a strategy or to pursue a strategic bet and hypotheses. Those are different things. This can be explained very well, but it has to be mapped out. And you have to work, if you want to really achieve sustainable adoption and success, you usually have to look at it like in this template, in this example. And then the last category of challenges that we've learned from the companies we interviewed around Viva Goals, it's managing onboarding and change, managing the human side of things, enabling people. So one example I just brought here is, I think that this is one of the key learnings, right? It's almost impossible to have every employee be ready for like a new tool, a new process, for the kind of capabilities that are also required behind setting good, measurable, outcome-oriented goals. It's something that wasn't asked from a lot of people for a very long time. So this is a learning process. So besides the basic enablement, we also always do, and I think many Viva Goals installations, there was some basic like videos and how to use the tool. What we've seen the most successful companies do very well, and this is again one example that we've built with a customer, is a sort of like a cohort-based enablement program that happens all the time. It's not like a one-time, here's the tool, please use it, but you have a cohort-based approach where every cycle, every 3 to 4 months, for example, you look at how's the tool being used, how's it being adopted, where are particular challenges on the skill side and teams, but also which parts of the product maybe are not integrated well, which doesn't work well, which integrations are missing, etc. And then based on these learnings, based on these kind of insights you best case get from your tool, you can make sure you enable the organization to adopt the process better and better, or other way around, to make the process work better and better for what you want to achieve. And I think that's a good picture here. Think of it in enablement and process improvement loops, and you should have one of those every cycle, every second cycle, so the process can continuously adapt to your organization, but also to your environment, to your market, to your priorities right now. I think that's something that has been underestimated in a lot of companies using Viva Goals from what we've heard. Just one example how this can look like. We have this strategy execution curriculum. So basically how this can work is that employees can basically pick different enablement programs and bits. It's not just like, here's the tool, this is how you do OKRs, but depending on what the challenges are, depending on what you learn in each cycle, you can dive deeper and say like, this class might be interesting for you. This training might be interesting for you. You might want to learn something just about KPIs and how your goals can be connected to KPIs. You might just want to learn something, how to make goal management work in your hierarchy, in your org chart. Organizational structures and goal structures interfering is such a big challenge. And it's not like this one for all, big bang, one-time enablement. It's need-based, yeah. And that's, again, one example how our strategic execution curriculum looks like when we help big companies introducing a new goal-setting process, a new platform like Workpath, and trying to make sure it's part of a bigger picture and the overall operating model. And that's just, as I said, three and a half, I would say, of the important capabilities and the important milestones the companies we work with, the companies we interviewed, are looking for to make the migration away from Viva Goals work and to build on the learnings they have with the previous experience or from the previous experience with Viva Goals. So that's the first part. And now I'd like to focus on 2 or 3 more from the technology checklist. If you want to learn more about how to continuously develop your operating model, your process infrastructure, your organization, if you are, for example, working in corporate development, this fourth point here on the left might be more interesting for you. So please reach out. We're happy to do these kind of deep dives. Just for the interest of keeping it short and crisp today, we're not going more into detail. And I think similarly important, of course, is a business case perspective. How can I measure the impact of this operating model, this tool? How can we make sure in 1 year in, 2 years in, we actually know the business value of what we're doing here? Also something, I think there's a webinar planned with some customers at the end of April, but nothing we're going to look at in detail today. We want to look just at 2 or 3 more elements of the technology side. And I think many of you joining today, as you read the Viva Goals headline and title of the session, you might have a stronger focus on the product side, the technological side. So let's zoom in there a little bit. So I think the first thing every company that comes from Viva Goal looks at is Viva Goal's feature parity. So your new platform, the new vendor, the new software you're looking for should be not less capable than Viva Goals. Yeah? Obviously, the usability, the how intuitive is the UX is one important part. Second on this list here, not going much deeper in there. But then I think the other big topic is integrations. And as said, I think the integrations that are in focus for most of the Viva Goals users are the Microsoft integrations. In a moment, I'm going to share what are the 4 to 5 most important Microsoft integrations. All of those 100 companies we interviewed seem to look at, but maybe 1 or 2 more like elements to focus on here before that. I will in a moment share sort of like an enterprise architecture perspective on integrations beyond the Microsoft suite, which we learned is really, really important, particularly when you ask customers, what do you want to do differently compared to how you've been doing it with Viva Goals? We will talk in a moment about AI capabilities. We'll get back to Microsoft's decision to shift all the Viva Goals resources to their AI teams in Copilot. And then I'm going to talk briefly about reporting and KPI management. Yeah? We're going to do all of that in like, again, one view on enterprise architecture in one place. So let's dive in. I'm starting with the Microsoft integrations. I don't have the exact numbers, right? If you were interested, of course, we can share those. But if you rank which integrations have been most important to these 100 plus companies we interviewed, those have been the 5 most important ones. So everyone says Teams. Almost everyone says Entra ID, of course, when you're like a big Microsoft user. Everyone says, almost everyone, I'd say Microsoft Planner, and then a lot of them want to integrate with Power BI, take metrics from there, and Azure DevOps. I would say the last 2 or 3 years have been gaining a lot of market share from Jira, from Atlassian. So this has been quite relevant as well. So those are the most important Microsoft integrations. I think if you're looking for a new platform, those are the ones certainly worth focusing on. We at Workpath have integrations into all of those dimensions. And I think the only additional recommendation I can make is really to test it and to look at your individual setup, because just because a company says we have an Azure DevOps integration, there's different ways how to do these integrations, right? How much manual work is still needed from users, and how smooth, how intuitive, how simple is it? It's definitely something looking at when you look at Viva Goals feature parity, particularly with regards to integrations. Let's move on to the next 2 to 3 checkmark items on the technology checklist for Viva Goals users. And of course, you will receive the slides, so you'll have both checklists, you'll have all the content, and then I hope this provides you with some value in your process. But let's look at this enterprise architecture perspective and how we map the needs and the vision of the companies we work with in the context of today's topic. So you see these 4 dimensions that you've seen before in the impact chain, right? It's just a bit more tangible. We're not talking about input, output, outcome, impact, but we're talking about resources, input, initiatives, projects, tasks, work, output. We're talking about goals, outcomes. So how will the investments and the output we're creating have a business impact? That's how we see a good goal management tool, a good goal management process, connecting the dots in this impact chain. And ultimately, the traditional KPIs, I mean, there's all kinds of KPIs, of course, but the traditional business impact KPIs, this is the structure that exists in every company. That's always been there, always will be there, no matter what process, no matter with investment or output or outcome, it has to drive business impact, and you want to be able to measure the business impact of it. So that's the impact chain that you want to have covered. Yeah. And so far, I think most companies using Viva Goals, they think of this as something that's relevant to have in a workflow tool. So Viva Goals was seen as a workflow tool. What does that mean? It's been a simple interface for every employee where you have simple workflows to connect goals with initiatives, yes, to define goals. Basically, you have templates, processes, you have workflows that help your teams to set goals and adopt this kind of process. So I think that's one thing. Now looking into the future, right? We always recommend to look at the entire impact chain. So apologies if you'll have the Workpath logo in here a couple of times. I just want to show the contrast and what we recommend to look out for. On the left, you can see we see Workpath as a horizontal workflow tool that can connect KPIs. We have a dedicated KPI module. Somewhere those data already exist, so you need to make sure they're part of it, and you can make them accessible in the workflow tool. Goal setting, of course, OKRs, important module. Initiatives, plan the output that supports the outcomes and the impact, and then the resources. So in Workpath, in the workflow tool for everyone, we have modules for all of these 4 elements. And I think this can come from different tools you might already be using, but connecting these dots, connecting the workflows and the processes is important. If we think back to one of the key problems a lot of Viva Goals customers shared, that the processes behind those dimensions, the tools also and data sources have not been connected, which is why integrations are so important. Yeah, we very much see a strong pattern when talking with these 100 plus companies that they take a broader view on integrations today. So they don't just look at the Microsoft integrations we've seen a minute before, but they think about how do we integrate with KPIs? Where does the data come from? Just yesterday, I talked to a Danish company, and one of their key topics was integrating resources. It's not about that the fact that they're not doing this today. It wasn't possible with Viva Goals, but their strategy team, together with finance, wants to connect financial buckets, I think they called it, budget items in a portfolio management solution, a financial tool, you might call it, with goals. And they want to be able to allocate resources on initiatives and goals. So making sure those things can be connected and you have the respective integrations is just really, really important. So that's the integration part, to feed the workflow tool, to make the process helpful. And again, the companies we talk with, also those that seem more advanced with regards to how they invest in the future operating model, they take a pretty broad look at integrations. Analytics, reporting. This can go 2 ways. How we look at this at Workpath is we have our own analytics suite. You want some reporting that might be very specific to what you're doing in the workflow tool. And of course, a good workflow solution for goal setting and strategy execution connects data from different tools. There's a lot of structured data that hasn't been structured before. You want to be able to show these kind of data and insights in other reporting solutions as well. So Workpath's answer is a analytics suite, but also a product we call data feed. So being able to extract data from the workflow tool and make sure the data you get through the integrations that get structured by teams and employees in the workflow tool can be found in your most important reports. and in your analytics infrastructure, which, for example, could be Power BI or Tableau. So holistic reporting, again, I think here's the key. Integrations and building bridges into how you do reporting today. That's what we would recommend looking out for. It's about not just having OKR related reporting, right? You don't just want to have isolated reports on these islands. You want holistic reports that help you understand the impact chain, that help you identify problems on the initiative, on the output level that might have an impact on your business numbers, on your KPIs. So holistic reporting is what we really recommend focusing on. And then last but not least, on this level, if you have the whole impact chain, best case, somewhere in one place, if you have the integrations to connect the data and structure the data you already have somewhere living in other processes and tools, if you can cluster that and turn data into insights, if you have the kind of reports, the kind of sliced and diced perspectives your teams need for better decisions, a last element I think a lot of companies focus on right now when thinking about the future after Viva Goals is how can we structure our conversations? How can we enable better decisions in the right kind of rhythm with the right kind of frequency? We all know it. I'm sure everyone in that call knows it. These kind of tools, if they're not used regularly, if you haven't managed to get the data in there, if you haven't managed to provide value for all stakeholders, it will be just a documentation tool, and nobody, even if there's insights in there somewhere, nobody will work with that. So how can you integrate this in your routines is a process question, but also a technological question. So I think an integration in MS Teams can help a lot. Integrations with Calendar and other meeting tools can help. We at Workpath, we have a standalone conversations product where you can structure your meetings and basically make sure you look at your impact chain, your goals, problems along the way in a regular routine every 1 or 2 weeks, for example. It's all about how can we enable the organization to talk more regularly about insights and make better decisions faster. Again, this can happen in different kind of ways, different kind of tools. The worst kind of way I think a lot of companies see they want to get away from is PowerPoints that are being prepared with a lot of effort. And once the company leadership meets or once the product team meets, these data, they're already outdated. Nobody trusts the data, and you have like a lot of no decisions or late decisions or bad decisions. So automating this, everything that's underneath to enable better conversations and meaningful decisions more regularly is what most companies we talk to in this process right now put an emphasis on. And now, and this is already like the final part of today, I think there is something very interesting happening right now. And this is the quickly increasing and rising role of AI and AI agents, both in enterprise and in enterprise software. So there's all kinds of AI agents out there. I mentioned Microsoft Copilot already, but I think what's interesting is that these AI agents, it's not just about getting in AI in some parts of the process, in some parts of the workflow. I think AI agents, particularly the ones that you might communicate with in different ways. Imagine you have your personal chief of staff as an AI agent, or you have your in-house consultant as an AI agent. These are the AI agents that we, just 2 examples, at Workpath are developing. Imagine you can talk to this agent in your MS Teams like you do it in ChatGPT. Yeah, it's a conversational interaction, and AI agents will do a lot of good things. Our first versions, our first agents already prove that along the entire tech stack and across the entire architecture that we're looking at here. So what can AI agents do? Starting from the bottom, AI agents can help. If you let them connect with your Jira or your Microsoft Planner data, they can basically structure that data and make suggestions and say like, okay, it looks like these kind of projects, tasks, they sound like they actually contribute to this goal. Is that correct? They can sort of like identify gaps and say, we have this goal, but if I look at your project management, nobody really contributes to it. this should be something you look at. So that's one example of what an AI agent can do at the interface of workflows and planning to the other processes that you integrate with. If you think about reporting, AI agents are in a great position to, the more data they have and the better structured this data is, to raise issues faster and to make sense at a pace that you as a human just cannot do it. So I think what will change is you don't have to look through reports and click through it and do root cause analysis and find the issue. AI agents, again, this already happens today, are in a position to raise issues and tell you, look at this, something is going off rails. I think the confidence level of this strategic initiative is not right. All the initiatives below, they're not moving fast enough. Like, these kind of things can be identified as AI, and it's like one agent does the work of hundreds of analysts sometimes. Very interesting. And then last but not least, AI agents will be part of your meetings. They will suggest agenda items for your next QBR. They will summarize what you've discussed. They will remind you of important follow-ups from last management meeting or the last goal setting cycle. So AI agents will do a lot of things, again, across this entire process map, across the entire operating model, which is why it is so important to make sure they can integrate with this. So as I said, Workpath, we have our own set of AI agents, a little squad, growing squad of AI agents. Copilot is a huge platform that goes in that direction, where Microsoft, obviously with its integration as MS Teams, in Power BI, in MS Planner, has a lot of data to enable great use cases. So I think Microsoft still can play and will play a big role in the context of operating models and goal setting, just coming from a different angle. And you in your organizations will build your own AI agents, right? I think this is something that's growing very quickly right now. A lot of people say IT departments will be sort of like HR for AI agents. Yeah? AI agents, most company in our IT and tech bubble are sure will have a very transformative impact over the next 5 years. So it's important that when you're making decisions now about your future setup, at least you're prepared for it. I don't think you can go faster than your own company. A lot of companies are still defining their policies. There's AI committees, etc. But being prepared for a future that's already here, and that's, you can already see what other companies are doing. You can see how enterprise software like Workpath, or also, of course, the Micro Suite is changing. You can be prepared if you look at a couple of things. And I think the main thing we're saying is, make sure your future tool, your future operating model, and the technological side of it is ready for this AI-enhanced future. So I mentioned that integrations, access to data is key for that. Being able to structure data, not just to throw in data, but have structured impact chains. AI agents will remain very dumb if they don't have a lot of data and if they don't have context. So the more context you can give, the smarter your AI agent will be, and the closer it will come to an actual very, very smart in-house consultant, chief of staff, PMO. So the more structured data your corporate goal setting or goal management tool has, the more powerful will be the agents that you connect with it. And last but not least, interoperability means, best case, the tool you're buying has its own agents, but best case, there's also an API that allows other agents you might be building yourself, or like Copilot, can take insights, can take structured data out of the tool. So it's actually a hub that makes your agents more powerful in the future. And that's something, again, it's a bit more futuristic, it might sound for some, but this is happening right now. And the fact that Microsoft, who's made a lot of really, really successful bets in the last 10 years, is shifting away from some of their workflow tools towards the agent, towards the conversational AI with Copilot, is just one indicator of what's happening in our industry and what's happening in enterprise software. So that's something, it's really our focus right now at Workpath, and we recommend looking in this dimension at least, to make sure you're prepared and you're not buying a solution now that doesn't support that kind of future. And here we're coming to the end. This is just like another map how you can look at this, an example from Workpath, how you can basically make sure along the entire impact chain you have the right kind of module and products. You don't need all of that. Nobody wants to overwhelm the organization, but you'll get it with the slides that we send after. And it might help you at least asking some questions to the vendors you're talking to now and internally when defining your future setup. So as a wrap up, it's connecting the dots and summarizing a little bit of what I said here, just the next 3 or 4 minutes, and then we're done. What are some best practices, and how did we draw conclusions from these learnings and what we offer? Just real quickly, you have to look in your position. If you're responsible for the future after Viva Goals, the commercials, right? Some companies are still paying for Viva Goals until the end of the year. Data migration and the migration of teams is important. Change management in the context is really important. And then, as I just mentioned, the operating model design. I think there's a lot to learn in these experiences with Viva Goals that you can benefit from now. So Microsoft seems to be very open with regards to prolongations. If you negotiate, if you ask for it, if you insist on it. So that's something I think worth considering and trying for most companies out there, buying yourself time until the end of the year. We, for example, have a policy that we do not charge for contractual commercial overlaps. So if your contract still runs at the end of the year and you're paying for it, if you're working with us the next 2 or 3 years, we will have you not pay for the time where the processes or the contracts will still overlap. So I think that's something, whoever you talk to, whoever vendor you consider, that can be helpful to also make sure you make it work from the budget side. Data migration, I think it's important to understand what the Viva Goals data download and export functionality has to offer. It is limited. You can download goals and everything around that, but it's limited with regards to org structure, team, and ownership in combination with the goals in this structure. So there is a way to handle that if you combine different data sources and you have like a table matching that brings all of it together, but make sure to test this early and get all of this data together. Also something we do every day right now. So if you want to learn more, please reach out. Happy to help. Change management, I mentioned. A transparent migration timeline, clear enablement for people, not just for the change, but also for the future operating model, how to behave with that. And then another thing we see a lot in these processes, like the year goes by so fast. So consider summer holidays, consider the seasonality, plan with buffer. The end of the year will be here very, very quickly. So make sure everything is considered. I think big learning we've had the last couple of weeks. Everyone started into the years like we have a full year, but now they realize until you're through it, the year is actually not a lot of time. And then last but not least, building on what I said in the beginning, make sure at least try to involve these stakeholders, try to work towards a process map, and then deduct, important, have IT at the table and deduct an integration roadmap. Yeah, what tools, what processes should be connected. None of this has to happen right away. We can start if you introduce Workpath without almost any integration, but it has to be clear. It only will be really sustainable and have the best impact if step by step you integrate all the dots along the impact chain, and your goal setting tool, your goal setting process does not just stay an isolated island. Another example, it's a template you'll get. I'm not going to details. So these kind of migration pipelines, I think help a lot collaborating with your future vendor, but also internally with your task force, your team working on that. So I hope this might be helpful for some of you. And yeah, with that, I'm closing. What are we doing at Workpath? All the services with regards to migration we can offer for free. Again, I hope the last 45 minutes or so have shown we did our homework, we did a lot of research, we tried to be as close as possible to what companies in this situation now need. So as well, the technical and the data migration, as well as the user migration enablement, if you commit to Workpath for the next 2 or 3 years, we invest. Well, we want to make sure that this move that certainly hasn't been beneficial or great for everyone is as smooth as possible, and that's an investment we're willing to make. Testing data migration as early as possible. So we have free trials and sandboxes. I think if you want to create a good pull effect and a good migration of your team, everything they had in Viva has to be in the new tool, has to be in Workpath. So they feel like home first time they enter Workpath, trying this out, playing around with the tool, important. All of the integrations you got from Microsoft are free as part of the migration program. So we want to make it very simple that as well as Viva Goals was integrated in your Microsoft suite, Workpath can be that integrated as well. And last but not least, I already mentioned it, this zero commercial overlap policy, I think, is important for a lot of your company's budget, the budget you have for this topic. So if you're interested in that, obviously, we'd be very excited to start a conversation. For some of the people I've seen on the call, I'd rather say to continue the conversation. And with that, I hope you found some good bits and insights in these last 45 to 50 minutes. We do have a couple of minutes for Q&A in case there are any questions. I'll also share my contact details at the end. So if you have rather a need for a one-on-one conversation, if you want to talk with our experts, this is also a possibility. But maybe I pause here for just a couple of seconds if there are any questions. No? Okay, then it's a wrap. I'll wrap it up. Reach out to us. You can easily book a meeting. We sent the slides. There's a couple of more things that I think could be interesting for you, things that are not included in Viva Goals, things that we at Workpath have launched just this year, like our strategy hub that you see here, or like our AI bootcamp and the AI agents I talked about. So would love to meet, would love to have a personal conversation. And then for those of you who are being in Central Europe, we're right now doing a road tour. So next week we are in Amsterdam, then we are in the Düsseldorf, the Rhineland area. We'll be in Munich, Hanover, Wolfsburg, that area. You can see it here on the slide. We'll be all over, best case. And if you want to meet us in your city, there's leadership lunches where we do little AI impulses and conversations with industry peers. But there's also, of course, the option to meet us in person in your offices. So if you are interested in that, check out our stops and reach out. End of this month, we're hosting another webinar on conquering the corporate framework jungle. I think we touched upon this a little bit. Everyone, I think, in big corporates is rather overwhelmed by an abundance of processes, tools, and frameworks, methodologies like OKRs, Hoshinkanri, SAFe, and how does all of that play together? This is the webinar at end of next week. So if you want to join, sign up. It's a free live session as well. And again, one last time, if you want to talk to an expert, someone from our Viva Goals migration team, we have a dedicated team which doesn't do anything else right now, you could say. So if you want to book a meeting with one of our experts, it can start with just a simple brainstorming and sparring before you make any decisions. We were happy to have that kind of conversation, maybe also dive a little bit deeper into the topics we talked about today. But for today, this is it. Yeah, thank you everyone for joining. Thank you everyone for your time. Hope to be in touch and talk to you soon.